is. Here we are. Welcome, everybody, and I hope you guys are having an incredible month, an incredible week. Welcome to Apotheosis Live, and the purpose of Apotheosis is to discuss how to reach the highest point of divinity and the road to that, how to embody that, all the tools that we need to know from science and spirituality, merging these two and educating ourselves on the different aspects of ourselves in order to embody our highest expression. So today I have a very special guest with me, Broklin Rayne, who is so gracious to join me on today's episode, where we're going to be discussing many interesting topics. And without further ado, Broklin, welcome.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here. And yeah, what a perfect time to discuss these types of tools and navigational systems for this unprecedented experience, human experience.
That's right. That's right. We were just talking about that briefly, and it really is a time for major transition. And I guess it's something that is a higher orchestrated thing by all of our collective souls that are here to really push forward through the limiting belief systems and, you know, transmuting from that suffering point into this really expansive expression of co-creation and joy. So let's jump right into it. I first of all, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into this work? Tell us about your background.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. So, similar to many, I think I believe at this point, although as we all know, linear time is a bit wonky. I believe it was about 9 years ago. I was living a very conventional life, and yet I had been really quite well. I had created so many opportunities that had kind of come into this full internal storm to really reach my surrender point. And so I kind of gotten to this place of like a full capacity of physical, mental, emotional, and I guess to some degree, spiritual inner pressure, and I just had a surrender point, had a surrender moment. I threw my hands up into the air, and I was just like, okay, how do I participate in coming to a place of inner peace? Because this is obviously, not no longer working. And at that point in time, I had grown up in a very, in a Catholic background, organized religion. I always had a very deep connection with Source and with Christ energy. Yet none of that ever made any sense to me. So I had never explored other spiritual practices or lineages or anything. I was, hadn't been guided to do so at that point. So when I reached the surrender point and literally like crying and like throwing my hands up in the air, I heard a voice audibly say, "It's time to meditate." And, and I was like, what? I had heard about it. I had maybe, seen, different people talking about it here and there on TV and stuff like that, but I had never participated in it. So being that I really now retrospectively look back, like it was like my divine alarm clock had gone off many times, and like finally the snooze button broke, right? And it was like, no, now you will wake up now, right? So I began to meditate. And well, first I found someone to assist me in figuring out how to even do that, because at that point in time I had such an incessant amount of mind chatter and all sorts of, the accumulation of all sorts of self-limiting beliefs and programs and, all of it, right? I like fully embraced and immersed myself in the human, experience of sleep state for, at that point, I think I was like 36 or 37 or something. So I had a full, lifetime of accumulation. And so when I started to meditate, it was really challenging. I thought, oh, again, like the thinking mind coming in, like, oh yeah, maybe other people can do this, but you're not going to be able to do this, that self-critic. But it didn't matter, because one thing I realized that happened in that moment of surrender is that I was also all in to this, unwavering faith, trust, and surrender. That even though I had no idea what I was doing, and I was in this state of chaos, I was going to do exactly that, regardless of what the thinking mind was saying. So I stuck with it, and it was, kind of keeping an eye on the alarm clock and like, when is it going to end, type of thing. And then finally, about 3 months in, I had this really profound experience where, I'd set the alarm for 15 minutes to meditate, and I was in it for, a couple of hours, and source came through and all this light, and, definitely, this embodied awareness that, okay, we are not alone. I am something far beyond this personality and all these roles and da 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 da. And so it just kept, from that point on, it was just like this really kind of super highway, and, just following the breadcrumbs and just surrendering into, I know nothing except for the fact that this is what I'm meant to do. And so it really, I had been a chef at that point for about 20 years, and it was kind of at the height of my, success in my career, and everything was, on paper was great. So much to the surprise of pretty much everybody in my life, they were like, "What? You're going to do what? You're going to not be a chef anymore, and you're going to go on this deep, spiritual journey and become, and share these tools and this wisdom with others." Like, it was just so mind blowing, right? It's totally mind blowing for them. But it was one of those things that, like most things in life, it was just like, yeah, no, this is what's happening. This is how it's supposed to be. So, it just kept kind of getting more and more and more magical and adventurous and expansive, and, and more of that deep knowing and desire of wanting to be in the greatest service to all beings, seen and unseen, in accordance to the highest divine law and order, which came in and dropped in right around that time of the surrender point. But I was like, what does that mean? And still to this day, like, do we really know? Probably not. But, I just kept following and going in the flow of it, right? And surrendering even more. And just when we think we've surrendering even more, right? So, that's led me into this kind of this now moment where, where I've been guided to meet humanity in this now time, to bring forth and be a vehicle and a channel of, the frequencies that are, I guess, most assisting or resonant with what is desired by each individual, as to assist them in sort of attuning to their home frequencies, to open up and become a mirror for them to remember more of who they are and why they're here. And that kind of comes through in so many different ways, whether it's, like a live channel transmission of light languages and frequencies. I consider myself to be a channel of, and connection with source. So bringing forth words and things that, meet each person where they are, kind of to meet them in their intention. So I don't know if I went off on a total tangent there, or if I even answered your question.
You totally did. Yeah. Thank you so much for that introduction. A beautiful journey, powerful transformation. I mean, that's incredible. So let's talk a little bit about, how did we get into the deeper wisdom, the alchemy? I mean, you talk about alchemy, and that's something that I work with as well. So, my question with people that enter into this realm is, how did you discover that? Was it something that you read in a book, or was it something that you discovered through your own internal, exploration? And how did you make sense of that information?
Yeah, great question. And I love it, because as soon as you started asking it, they were like showing like the whole, like, the blueprint. And I'm like, oh yeah. So, when I first had this surrender moment, I began to meditate. I was like, okay, what am I doing here? Like, where's the map, guys? Like, and so, like so many people, right, I had this unquenchable thirst to learn as much as I could about, all of it. And, but it's like most people, it's like, where do you even start? And again, I just have to say that, like, I'm so grateful because I just got guided to, like, serendipitously, like things, or synchronistically, things would just show up.
Yeah.
So, one of the first books that came into, to being, was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I was like, huh, okay, I think I've heard of this before. Everybody else I know had read it 10 years ago. But, so I started reading that, and I realized as I was reading it, like, so many things beyond the words were taking place. Like, I was seeing these lights come up on the ceiling and, like, having this whole experience. And and then so it was just like, I would, from that book, something else would spark, or then I would go on the internet or something to look up a word, and it would take me somewhere completely different. And it happened to be, and I was like, oh, that's weird. How did that happen? But it was like another book or something, and it was like the book that I was meant to read. So, so then I would read that. So, it's like so many things, right? But in conjunction with that, like with taking in that intellectual kind of connection to it, and as we know, these books and so many of these things are living transmissions. So at that point of awareness, I wasn't in great awareness of, the transmission that was taking place beyond words, but clearly it was happening, right? And maybe the lights on the ceiling should have been like a better indicator of that for me. But I didn't have the vernacular and the, at that time. So I just was like, oh, this must be what happens when you read these books, So I was following the breadcrumbs, reading the books, but in conjunction with that, from the very beginning, one of the, for me in particular on this journey, and I know many others too, the breath, the sacred source consciousness of breath. I mean, I just get the chills even saying it. Has been such a profound teacher and alchemist, and like, takes, the light and the intention and the presence, and like takes it deep into, that catalyst for that alchemy, right? So as I'm reading all of these things, I'm also showing up every day, asking to release what no longer serves me, and bringing in, I am divine peace, or, I am unconditional divine love, or, I am the will of source, and all of these, statements, right? And so everything is kind of like opening, and, and what I realized, and then I'm like watching YouTubes, and I'm just like, it's like insatiable, right? Or unquenchable. You're just like, oh my gosh. And then, I'm being guided. I'm like, okay, well, if this meditation, and then I was led into being introduced to breath work too, I'm like, if this has been such a huge catalyst and so profound in my ability to further understand, the greater and higher levels of conscious awareness, beyond, the matrix, then, maybe I'm meant to share and show in my own way that with others. So, I fully transitioned out of being a chef within like 8 months of awakening, and like went back to school for the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, because I was still sort of like, in that practical, like, okay, how can I apply my last 20 years of education and application and, health and wellness and all this stuff that I was so into, into the spiritual path. So it was sort of like the stepping stone of it all. But what I realized, and I think we all do this, right? So it goes from like an intellectually understood concept, and maybe penetrates in certain layers and levels of our consciousness to open up, and then we're doing our practices of breath, or some people, qigong, tai chi, all these different yoga, physical practice, etc. And then the more and more and more I kept just showing up each day, and showing up and opening myself up to surrendering into the unknown, the more and more and more it was becoming an embodiment, right? And that's, so it's like those layers of alchemy, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, and then in comes, these greater teachers and teachings, and these downloads start to come in, and then, and it just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. And then, and it's going to infinitely continue, right? It's like every single day I totally surrender into the fact that I know nothing. Yeah. Because every day when we wake up and we show up and we access higher levels of, conscious bandwidth, then we realize there are infinite truths that exist. And it's not to say that what was true yesterday is not true today, but it's being run through this whole additional lens or level of consciousness whereby now there's a whole nother set of truths that exist, and they thread and interface with these other truths. Yet it's like, oh, hold on a second, so yes, so I feel like, that alchemy just presents itself in so many different outlets and ways. And I love the fact that you brought in as the intention sort of for today too, neutrality, because, as I know, we know, right? That's the access point to any alchemy, is that 0 point, right? It's like when we come into that place of like, okay, let me center myself right there where I now have access to the infinite possibilities that exist, taking us out of those like finite potentials and different roles and frequencies. And then from that place, on point, we can apply all these different tools of alchemy. So
Exactly. And so what I'm hearing is this spiritual journey, it's very much the being rather than doing. A lot of people think that, we have to do these steps in order to reach these certain things, but it really is, it's a much more profound integration of being and experiencing these states that really allow us to open up. And I think that this is how we activate our DNA, through that work, through that silence, through bringing ourselves back into that neutral point. We begin to open up many aspects of ourselves, and we can go into that. But I love that you talk about the blueprint. Let's talk about that. What is the human blueprint, and how do we access that information?
yeah, oh my gosh. I used to, when I first, was introduced by the guides to the idea of a blueprint, I was like, oh, great. Here we have this blueprint, and, this is good. Like, we can all kind of relate to this. And, I'm thinking and seeing it and kind of understanding it, of course, on a multidimensional level to some degree, but I'm thinking, it's some relatively simple system. um, and as we know, there's so many different facets and angles and threads to what that blueprint looks like. And so, to sort of, to simplify it to some degree, it's my understanding that, that we choose our blueprint, right? We choose like a pretty significant blueprint prior to determining that we're going to incarnate here. And we have like layers upon layers of blueprints, right? Because our oversoul is sort of like the master holder of so many blueprints that are in play simultaneous to this now moment that we're experiencing here. And as we know, right, there's like everything happening at once. But if we're talking, in direct relationship to the blueprint for this Earth incarnation, as we know, it's so unique, right? It plays into so many different threads of consciousness and systems of consciousness. Of course, some of the simple and low-hanging fruits of that are the astrological, aspects of the blueprint, right? When we determined we were going to come in and, implant our soul seed here to incarnate, when we birthed, right? And so we come in and we have the overlay of that. We have, and within that, of course, there are all sorts of systems of numerology and so forth and so on. We have, what my understanding is that we have, as we drop in and uniquely into this Earth incarnation, we take on the blueprint. Okay, we come in with our own soul blueprint and our many assignments of multidimensional, multiversal nature. But then even in those, right, those are directly linked to of what portion of the bandwidth of the collective blueprint of the human consciousness, right, through our high self, like what of that are we going to take on into our blueprint to, experience, in many cases transmute the densities of, create integration of. Some people, of course, come in just to experience it, witness it, and embody it, and carry it into, and to another incarnation, right? And then, we take on and come in to our biological lineages, and we take on aspects of that ancestral blueprint that, that we're going to work through, or sort of be, the divine alarm clock for disengaging. And again, I'm running this a little bit through the lens of my excitement of all being here in service. But certainly, as we know, we're all unique, God, sovereign, free beings. And so some people, as we know, are here to take on so many of these imprints, but then remain in a complete sleep state through this, ascension cycle, to see what it would feel like to carry and hold on to these densities, and really, not have placed within our blueprint any real desire or assignment to awaken, or to transcend any of that, or to integrate it. So there's so many different, what look like, holographic, overlays of systems of light, and, assignments and agreements that make up this, what we consider our blueprint. And as part of the, the collective blueprint of humanity, well, then they talk about often Sophia Gaia's blueprint, right? The macro of our physical micro. And also the blueprint for the collective of humanity's ascension, right? And what that looks like in terms of, yes, everybody's individual, but, part of that blueprint is the resurrection of the highest crystalline nature and, divine architecture to come in. So there are all these different blueprints that are kind of, in flow, if you will. And, and here we are trying to navigate through the different layers of it, right? And it just shows up as this massive hologram of quantum fabric of these like light systems and grid systems and highways and byways. And sometimes when we zoom in on it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like no wonder we choose, most of us, to awaken little by little, because if all of this was exposed and shown and brought forth at once, it would blow our fuses.
Right. There's just no way we'd be able to integrate it and have a physical human life. I mean,
Yeah.
it just doesn't. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. And so when the soul enters into the body, it really does take like a snapshot of all of these systems and puts it into this beautiful vessel that is the body. And so, every experience that we have, it's so divinely designed. That's something that I really want to focus on, because a lot of people, especially right now, they're feeling so overwhelmed, so disconnected. They have a feeling of disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that couldn't be farther from the truth. There simply is no disconnect. You are that, the embodiment of all of these truths. And the way to enter in that is to begin to work on this vessel, to connect with the vessel and use that as a connection directly into that divine, higher wisdom. So would you say that when people are activating this information, little by little, by changing their vibrational frequency, they have access to more information of their blueprints? Or how does it work? How do they access the different levels of information?
Yeah, I love that. Well, as you know, right, as we all hear, I should say, like everything that we ever desire to connect to in way of wisdom, or or knowing, or truth, lies within. And of course, that couldn't be more true, right? But as we also know, as we dropped into this human experience, and chose to come in with the blindfold on and then navigate through and accumulating everything. Yeah, it is truly this whole experience and journey, right? Of, okay, and I speak of myself in this, like, at first I was like, I have no idea what it is I'm supposed to release, or what no longer serves me. I mean, I have some ideas, but let me just like kind of offer that up to, whoever's up here or in here or around, that does have a clearer understanding of that, right? So again, I think such a huge component of accessing greater and greater and greater clarity and bandwidths of, access to what that blueprint are some of the key foundational spiritual building blocks of faith, trust, and surrender, right? Because the thinking mind is really one of the main, aspects of, of the embodiment of these finite potentials, and, of really finding ourselves continuing in these looping patterns of suffering and self-limiting beliefs and right? So if we can kind of gain a greater kind of connection with, like, okay, I don't even necessarily know what all that means, but let's just say we're going to, work on moving through and releasing, whatever patterns and belief systems and thoughts that are part of this like mind cloud that are dialed in and imprinted in my thinking mind, using our breath or whatever tools, right? Releasing, just surrendering into releasing that which no longer serves us, and bringing in more light. That's one thing that I found pretty quickly on this path, that light plus intention equals profound alchemy, right? And breath plus intention equals profound alchemy. So again, the thinking mind is trying to analyze and prioritize and say okay, well, what do I need to do? And, to your point, do. And it's really about, no, it's just setting a clear intention and finding our own way, however it is, of connecting to our heart, connecting to that present moment, that 0 point, that neutral point. And we don't have to have all the answers, and we never will through our thinking mind. But if we could just surrender into some of these simple, in theory, simple practices, and just allow ourselves to release, then these layers of the onion, we often hear people refer to it as, and it's just such a great analogy, because as we know, the onion is like, okay, peeling, right? But it's true, right? So the more we allow ourselves to release the frequencies from us, that no longer serve us, through trusting in when we set an intention to do so, that's exactly what's happening. And we bring in more of whatever it is that we desire to create in our life. And in this case, maybe it's divine clarity. I command myself to remember, who I am and why I'm here. I command my consciousness to bring forth, who I am or who I've been and why I'm here, right? And so, again, it's just that patience, right? And that practice of letting go, so we can create more clarity and we can create more space. And as that takes place, as we release those layers of density, and we come in, and in doing so, of course, we're embodying more and more and more of our soul fragments, our wholeness, right? Because we're taking them out of this field of coordinates of entanglement, and we're bringing them back in and creating a bigger and bigger and bigger bandwidth of our home frequency, of our core essence as source. Then it's like, oh, okay, great. Let me start bringing in layers of oversoul technology, the monadic framework, because now there's the space to do so, right? And so it starts to come in, and it's igniting all of these different, higher dimensional planes of access and awareness, and the light, of course, we know, is such a profound vehicle and, and pathway of bringing in this awareness, of transmuting and assisting us in, in alchemizing and letting go of those densities. So it's just, I think one of the things, because every day people are like, well, I want to get there faster. And self included, right? When I first started awakening, I was like, this is not happening fast enough. I'm sorry, guys. We need to speed this up, right? And they were like, great, go sit in silence. Go sit in silence and just keep doing this, which is, so they were like, the more you surrender and you let go of the resistance, because resistance creates more of the same, right? Creates more of the same of that which you are resisting. They're like, just go in and just trust and set your intention. And that's where the greatest and most exponential growth, and where the space that you'll have the biggest sort of bursts of consciousness and downloads take place. when you're just in that place. So, but I will say a really powerful statement is, I am divine clarity. And, when we bring that in and we like bring in this really beautiful, clear plasma clarity frequency, I feel like it's a huge catalyst for really, embodying exponentially greater and greater bandwidths of that remembering that we all desire.
That's amazing. So tell us about the courses that you teach. What is it that you're teaching in your courses?
Yeah, sure. So there's like a nice sort of range of things offered. There is a sacred breath of resurrection that takes place, and that's a platform or a community of light rather, where it meets Monday through Wednesday, and there's a live channel transmission. So we go deep into this rhythmic sacred breath that has been shown to be a common thread in a lot of the different timelines that we often consider to be like some of the most enlightened timelines for humanity, right? Like Lemuria and Atlantis and some of the Egyptian timelines. And of course, as we know,
Can you talk a little about those?
oh yeah,
Mhm.
sure. Is there something in particular?
Yeah, well, let's talk about those timelines. How do they affect us, and how do we use them for our own healing and understanding?
Yeah, great question. Because a lot of times people will ask that. They're like, what's the relevance? Okay, so these exist, but what's the relevance of accessing, our soul fragments and so forth, or accessing our Akash from these timelines? Um, and of course, how I best understand that is that, we left behind lots of very significant seeds of consciousness, higher, threads of connection with ourselves as source in those timelines, because that was very prevalent and that was very much a part of those civilizations. There were higher states of dimensional consciousness that were, the common threads during those timelines. And so I feel that most beings that have incarnated during this time, during this golden age of ascension, this age of full disclosure, full transparency, we've incarnated with so many purposes, and of course, again, unique blueprints and soul signatures, etc. But one of the parts of the Gaian and the collective of humanity's blueprint for this ascension cycle is to be able to go into all the layers of the different timelines and that have taken place, and of course many far beyond Lemuria and Atlantis and Sumeria and Egypt and the ones that we most often hear about, so that we can kind of do a full on integration of polarity, right? And during those timelines, there were very significant pivotal points in those timelines where some of the agendas that are not aligned with full unified consciousness, law of one, etc., were brought forth into to interface these higher levels of embodied God consciousness, and that worked in direct relationship to assisting us in experiencing what we're experiencing now, the reincarnation wheel and the third density, right? And these lower and with much more polarity, etc., which we know is all divinely purposed. But as we are now in this really pivotal moment of ascension for the planet, for our own soul's journey, for that of the collective, accessing and bringing forth whatever we've chosen to imprint within our cellular DNA, in way of imprints, right? In way of imprints, whether it's retaining the wisdom, retaining or experiencing and seeing what what a particular trauma on a physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual level when we allow ourselves to go deep into that exploration and bring that forth, and we determine, okay, we're going to apply some of our tools of alchemy, we're going to release the traumas, we're going to bring in the wisdom. As we know, that affects the entirety of all beings, right? Upon earth and beyond. So each and every one of us are bringing in our own unique sort of divine snowflake, right? Our own unique individuation of light and sound. And each one of us has, a beautiful combinations of gifts and abilities and these blueprints to assist in the greater process of ascension. And so hopefully that answered the question well.
Okay, wonderful.
It's such a big one,
There's
so
a
many
lot
things.
of parts to it.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let's talk about our time right now that we're in this collective movement. What are some of the tools that you suggest? And we had a question from the audience asking how much time should we sit in silence? So, what are some of the things that you mostly recommend for this time when people are dealing with so much input of information? We're like in an information overload, and
Mm-hmm.
also, dealing with so much difficulty discerning between things because of the division that is so present in so many different areas of our reality right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do we find unity in that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Well, I think one of the things that's really profound that comes in over and over again is that there's really no one way, right? There's really not a particular way. I mean, each one of us are so unique. And I think in an effort for us to come back into this greater embodiment of sovereignty and freedom and our ability to really know ourselves, self-realization, it's really a beautiful practice to sort of feel in and know, like, okay, well, let me test this out. Let me test this out. Okay, I resonate with the idea that, we're meant to perhaps find that space of self-nourishment, that space of sitting in silence or practicing. Let me see what feels right for me. And each day checking into it, right? Because there is no one answer to that, of course, right? I know when I first started to awaken and I had that really profound first experience with meditation, I ended up meditating for like 2-3 hours at a time for like months after that. I was just like, oh yeah, okay, here we go. This is what I'm supposed to do here. And the guides came in, they're like, no, not exactly. Like, you've done this in other lifetimes, but in this lifetime, you're not going to sit, in a cave and meditate all day because you're here to fully immerse yourself in the full human experience and as one, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can, so I think we go through different pockets and periods of time, where
Mm-hmm.
we feel like, okay, I really feel like for me to find that home frequency, that place of neutrality, like you're saying, amidst all this chaos, I need to create these pockets. But then we'll go through pockets where we're like, oh, wait, actually, I'm feeling like I'm meant to be in more of a place of like applying this or sharing this, right? And so maybe that space of silence, that space of connectedness becomes a little bit smaller in terms of linear time provided. Yet there are other applications of what it is that is meant to take place. And so it's like one of those fine, those beautiful dances of creation where I feel like, the more we let go of our judgment and of ourselves and, the more we let go of like the shoulds and the more we allow ourselves to just explore and have fun and like kind of flow through that childlike curiosity and joy and break free of the dogma and the systematic way of doing things and remember that we're infinite creator beings and we were meant to create in accordance to our own authentic expression of of joy and love and so just feeling into it, I guess, would be a great way to say that. Feeling into it, for I will say of my path, like it was one of those things that it was like almost as though, I mean, I know we're the choosers of our choices and we have free will, but it almost felt like, you know, my higher self was like a bit spicy, and she like came in right away and was like, yeah, now you just step over here, you know, girlfriend, and we've got things, you know. So it was like, you know, she quickly came in to assist in the navigation, right? It was like, no, this is going to be your single focus. I have children, beautiful beings, and you know, and she's like, and they're part of it too, obviously, right? And yet everything that you do is going to become a state of meditation, a state of stillness, a state of 0 point connection at some point along the path. And these are the different things, you know, that will, you know, essentially lead you into that space. And so that's what I would say ultimately, I think, and expresses itself uniquely, of course, to each and every one of us, but ultimately that's what happens, right? It's like we go less and less and less perhaps of that time of, you know, more like closing the eyes and sitting in the lotus position and meditating, although we do that too, and more into every single moment of our existence. There's no distinction or separation of, you know, the spirit life, the, you know, this path. It becomes that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and everything that feels in polarity of that instantaneously presents itself in such a way that, you know, we can kind of recalibrate back. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Are the chakra, here's a question from the audience from Cedric, who asks, are the chakra centers connected to changing the blueprint of life and awakening?
Ooh, good one. So, yeah, thanks, Cedric. So our chakras, as we know, are living, breathing portals of light, right? And so the more and more and more, they work in conjunction with our blueprint. Absolutely. And here's something that kind of is like a duh aha moment, of which there are many. But recently, I would say in the last 3 months, the guides came in to show, you know, we can transcend our own blueprint. And it's like, oh, of course we can, right? And so, Cedric, to your point and to your desired exploration of this, right? Absolutely. So our chakras are set up and are in full communication, right, with our blueprint. And so when we come into this life and we set, you know, our coordinates into the different assignments on a soul, ancestral, and collective assignment, you know, our chakras, which we can look at as beautiful sacred geometry, like that houses our individuation of light and sound, right? They shift, like it's almost like you take a puzzle and you go, you know, and you start scattering the pieces into different places, right, within the quantum field, in accordance to the assignments that you come into to navigate through. And again, the more and more we bring back the fragments of ourselves, right, when we get to that place where we're like, okay, I think I've accumulated enough now, and now I'm going to come back home, we start to re-engage and reinstate, you know, to greater levels of wholeness, those chakras, right? We fortify them, we strengthen them, we bring back the life force energy that we've appropriated out into this greater field of quantum entanglement. And as we do that, then we're able to bring forth and integrate more and more and more of our oversoul technology, our monadic framework. And as we're doing that, and it comes in layers and stages and phases, we're shifting out of our, you know, our entry blueprint of our chakra system, or we're not even shifting, we're integrating and expanding. And then, you know, so our chakras are growing and shifting and evolving and illuminating in accordance to how we're appropriating our consciousness to navigate through our blueprint. And so they work synergistically and as one, right? And the more and more and more we're embodying that monadic framework, which could also be, you know, translated to embodiment of heaven on earth, right? The more and more and more we expand our chakras into almost what it appears to be like a one chakra, like a one system. Um, but along that way, we can, in these higher levels of consciousness, as we're accessing, more and more and more of our bandwidth of extrasensory gifts and technologies, we can directly, command, and in the embodiment of our oversoul, we're like, okay, well, there's, the orchestrator, or one of the main orchestrators of all of this blueprint system anyways. Let's see, what else do we want to add into this, right? Where can, and that's where they're saying, like, in the, in the process of the journey of completion of that which we set out to express through the blueprint, we can attain and connect with these higher galactic councils of source, light, to bring in additional layers and levels of our blueprint. So ultimately, to come back full circle with this, our chakras and our blueprint work together in this one system of of embodying the source consciousness and carrying out our master plan here.
Beautiful. Joyce Hartman asks, monadic framework? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, sure. So my understanding of that is that we have, like, okay, that when we talk about the oversoul, the way that Source kind of shows it to me is that it's the mothership, right? It's this massive expression of sound and light that houses every single technology, every single fractal of consciousness and experience that we've experienced as our individuation as Source. So from the time that we fractal off or split off from the main hub of Prime Source Creator into a unique individuation, we then are acting on behalf as Source Consciousness, but navigating through to express and to experience ourselves uniquely as Source. And in doing so, some of us perhaps, individuated towards more of like the beginning of the individuations of Source. And therefore our oversoul technology would house, a infinite amount of information. And some individuals are newer individuations, equally as profound, significant, omnipotent, and amazing. There is no judgment system outside of some of these lower dimensional ranges of consciousness. So I just put that out there because I know I have a felt sense that immediately we all as humans begin to say, like, well, what am I, right? So from this mothership of our oversoul, our own unique sound and light signature that houses all the different embodiments that we are simultaneously experiencing right now and have experienced. From that, we determine upon, and Earth is, every planetary system and star system is unique in how this is expressed. So we'll speak specifically to the Earth incarnation and the monadic framework. So as, from this massive sphere, although it's not exactly a sphere, we'll just use that for purposes of explanation, of light and sound, Source light and sound signature. Through the different councils and, multidimensional, multiversal bandwidths of consciousness that we resonate with and that we're in assignment with, we determine of that what sort of blueprint or framework of this total bandwidth of consciousness that we would ultimately like to bring down, in the stages of higher ascension here, into embodiment, to be in the greatest service and the greatest embodiment that makes sense of this particular planetary existence, right? Because, for instance, you wouldn't necessarily, if you're an original individuation of Prime Source Creator, it wouldn't benefit anyone to create a monadic framework that housed your entire signature of your oversoul, because it would be so omnipotent and, and such a dimensional frequency range that it wouldn't be digestible to, to this earth experience, so to speak. So you work with teams and individuals, or individual collectives, I should say, to create this. You can think of it as like a light suit, to create this column or this bandwidth or this sort of overlay of blueprint that is essentially going to be the highest frequencies attainable within the blueprint of ascension for Earth. And that sits above our high self. And so as we begin to integrate through this, wonderful time of ascension right now, more and more and more of our higher self framework, then we allow for that space to bring in our monadic framework. And essentially, my understanding of it is, when we've come to a place of complete integration of this monadic framework, we've basically come to a pretty significant embodiment of ascension, of God realization, of being able to fully be in that place of omniscience, right, of all knowing. And yet still it's so uniquely expressed for each individual. And going back to Cedric's question, when we fully embody that monadic framework, if that's part of what we've chosen to do in this lifetime, then, we can bring in, should we choose, and if it's appropriate, even more layers and streams of consciousness from our oversoul. So a lot of it is determined not only from our own soul's assignment here, but of course we are one, and we are meant to come back into this place of oneness. And so that's also determined by how much of an invitation we're hosting, each one of us, right, to assist in the invitation for humanity to keep up-leveling. And in that up-leveling, we can bring in more and more and more, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much for explaining that. That's so
Yeah.
important for people to understand, because a lot of times people get stuck on the idea that they have to be a certain way, or, do certain things in this lifetime. For example, they think, if I'm not a healer, I'm not being of service to others. But in reality, our expression and our higher blueprint, for some people, it's just experiencing your everyday life. It's just being aware. It's even your healing work or your work with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Every single expression is unique, and it's assisting the collective in its progression. Yes. When we come into the awareness, when we embody that awareness, and when we take, when we go in and connect with this vessel, and it's not just like this repetitive patterns that we're living, or when we're in let's say parasitic exchanges where we're not being aware of what we're giving out and what we're receiving back in. So I think that awareness is key and essential to each organism as it plays its unique vibrational frequency in this collective. So let's talk a little bit about, we have a question regarding how much, oh, excuse me, I want to sneeze. How much time should we oh, here, let me see. What is her opinion on prana feeding? Is it possible? Prana feeding, do you know what that is?
Prana feeding. I don't know that if by that we are referring to the sharing of our pranic energy, our life force currency with another. Is that what
I'm going to assume that that's what that means, because that's the only definition I have for feeding off prana. That would be like either recharging or, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think what I'm hearing, what wants to come through with that right now is that, there are lots of different ways. I think some systems and theories have led us to believe that, that we come in with an already determined level of how much prana that we are able to attain and experience in this lifetime. prior to incarnating. And certainly that is what they show, part of the old paradigm structure of, of incarnation. And it also still serves in some framework of that, of what we're still experiencing as the greater, collective of humanity. However, there are lots of different portals and systems and alignments and gateways and stargates, etc., that are opening up to, as we're choosing to ascend levels of consciousness on our own, in our own unique way. And to your point, is in such a full spectrum, all profound and equally significant. Lots of things that were always meant to be a part of this, this earth experience, that are coming back into resurrection through the ascension of Gaia, right? Her meridians, gateways, portals, and pathways of access. One really significant stream of this prana coming from the central sun, by way of Sirius, and also coming in and through our own, star, our own sun, right? Through these plasma solar frequencies that enable us to bring forth and to access and embody, even greater flow, and sort of feeding to the word that was used, feeding our ability to house more and more prana. Yeah.
So sorry, does that mean that we don't need to eat? I think her question directly, she just updated, was,
Okay.
can we replace food with prana? So
Oh, yes.
what do you think
Yes,
about
I
that?
love this question. In fact, some of my good friends, this is a topic of great discussion as of recently. So absolutely. And so that's interesting, because I was like, oh wow, that the 12th dimensional Syrians just like dropped right in on that. Absolutely, right? So, there have been multiple times within, the human experience since we were originally seeded, where we received our nourishment solely through frequencies of light, light, and then the different elemental consciousness, the frequencies of breath, and just the connection with the earth, and just being in proximity to the sacred source consciousness of water, right? But through our eye technology, which we often hear the eyes being the windows of the soul, well, they absolutely are the windows to the soul, to the higher self, to the oversoul, right? And of course, through lots of different stages of decline in our genetic composition, etc. A lot of the ocular technology, as it once was meant to be, has been skewed and fragmented. So this is a significant part of the rehousing and the integration of our divine, our crystalline blueprint. Is going in and resurrecting the very intricate systems and structures of our crystalline nature within our ocular technology, and then through doing that, being able to receive that nourishment from the sun. And we can sun gaze now, and there are lots of beings that practice this, right? And certainly many find sustainability in that. But I will say what I see and what the guides often share is that it all kind of goes hand in hand, right? The more we bring in the breath as one of the nutrients, right? Similarly to the sun, right? The more we're bringing that in, the more we're reminding ourselves, we're awakening ourselves, we're resurrecting the highest, plasma frequencies of ourselves. Then they're able to feed off of that. They're able to, as we clear out the stuff that no longer serves and we activate the dormant DNA, then we're essentially resurrecting the higher frequencies and the relationship, and the reminding the physical body as the beautiful system that it is. Oh yeah, that's right. This is how I translate this into nutrient. This is how I translate this into prana, right? And same with the sun, and with the different frequencies, of even beyond the sun, the different plasma frequencies and things that are coming through. So yes, and it's really exciting, right? And yet it's one of those things that it feels like, it comes hand in hand with all the other sort of tools and things that we're talking about today, of working together in tandem. You may not be met with success immediately upon engaging in this, if you know, you're perhaps just starting out because the body is like, wait, hold on a second. I have some things I want to release and make space for before I'm able to fully allow and connect with those types of things to become, my full sustainability, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just as a disclaimer, please nobody go and not eat food. Because I know a lot of
Yes.
people, we get very excited about these potential techniques, but the truth is, as Brooklyn was saying, is that it very much goes hand in hand. So there does need to be that preparation. If you're going to be feeding off light, you need to be moving light in your body. Like you need to
Mm.
be clearing and you need to be meditating. You need to be in that state to allow and support. You can't run out into a really busy job and then continue doing that until you begin to balance how you're managing energy and life force. It's very important to learn how to manage life force. And you know, eating light is very much the management of that life force, which is
Mm.
possible. We have a question from Tesseract that says, I feel like I've changed timelines quite a few times since I started working on myself. Is this me clearing past life healing? So when we're changing timelines, are we clearing past life karmic agreements, or how do you see it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's certainly one of the components of what takes place. I've sensed that Tesseract also comes in with a pretty advanced technology to work with, sort of the malleability of timelines, even in some different ways beyond maybe what everybody at this point in time, possesses or even chooses or will choose to possess. However, to answer the question directly, absolutely, because they show, there's truly infinite timelines. Even in this moment that we're having right now, they show that there are, almost infinite timelines to this timeline of where our presence and our consciousness exists in exchange. So the more and more and more we come into that 0 point, right, and whatever techniques that we choose to use to access, to say, okay, what fragments, calling home the fragments, which fragments hold timelines, right? Fragments are projected out into the quantum fabric and are directly associated with timelines, whether it's, past, present, or future. So when we're in a process of, commanding home our full embodiment of ourselves as source, and we're in the process of desiring to come into a greater, place of full self-awareness, full self-realization, wholeness, so to speak. And we're calling in the fragments of ourselves that we've fractured off in different experiences that are holding coordinates of density, right? When we bring those back into wholeness and we simultaneously, through different practices of alchemy, disengage, transmute, and let go of the self-limiting beliefs and emotional densities and physical traumas, et cetera, that are associated with those timelines and those fractals and those experiences, we then essentially shift our position, within the quantum fabric. So we are repositioning ourselves. We are disengaging from where some of these timeline bundles have, previously been anchored, so to speak, into lots of different aspects of the separation matrix, et cetera, that hold us in these looping frequencies and looping patterns and looping sort of like looping frequencies and timeline loops is, I think, what they're trying to call it right now. So when we call that back in and we disengage, yeah, we're like, okay, here we have totally shifted that. We have integrated that. We have shifted that. And we haven't just shifted it for ourselves, consequently. We've shifted it for all beings that carry a similar frequency, pattern of frequencies and
Yeah.
and collective assignment and ancestral and, all of it, right? Oh, I can't hear you, Geraldine. I think maybe got muted.
It's because I muted. Okay,
Oh,
sorry. Thank you. That was beautiful. Would you help us understand breath? You manage a course on breath. So could you maybe give us some tips on how we need to breathe and what techniques you teach for breathing so that
Yeah.
our audience can learn and practice that today?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll just, it's funny. I feel like all of our galactic beings that are here with us are super excited about this topic
Love
right now.
it. I love it.
So again, giving full permission to, to everybody to remember that we're infinite creator beings, and we're sacred source consciousness. And so is the breath, right? And it's a unifying field of consciousness, and it's in full commitment of service to the law of one and how it manifests here on earth. So when we hear the breath of life and the breath of God, the breath of source, that's exactly what it is. It totally unifies us in so many ways and connects us, right? It connects us to our prana. It connects us, and assists us in the animation of this physical vehicle. So there are infinite ways that we can breathe, and there's a lot of encouragement right now from the guides and beings here to play around with it and to have fun. But for the purposes of just sharing some of the techniques that I have personally found to be very connecting and alchemizing, I'll start by saying the breath of resurrection, which is what takes place in the daily breath practice and offering that I do, is that it's all in through the mouth and out through the mouth, and it's a 2-part inhale and a 1-part exhale. And I will say this is an extremely powerful breath. A lot of the divine feminine esoteric schools and beings that have really assisted and teaching throughout the different timelines and ages how to resurrect, what we would consider the Merkaba, which of course is, everybody's own unique expression of their own light ship embodied, right, or activated. So when you do this breath, similarly to the disclaimer of it's still important to eat food until we, till we truly know and have been advised that it's okay to do otherwise. Similarly, I would say with this particular flow of breath, to really create the space for yourself for some nourishment, for some integration time. And not to be doing it while you're driving a car or doing something like that, because you will transcend levels of consciousness quickly, and the body has an innate recall of this particular breath, and it immediately catalyzes massive journey of alchemy and self-transformation. So that said, lying down or seated, and then creating some space for integration until, like other things, you've done it so many times that you have a greater understanding of how you're going to respond to it. So it's a 2-part inhale and a 1-part exhale, and it's all through the mouth. So it sounds like this. So you inhale through your lower belly, inhale through your heart, exhale, inhale lower belly, inhale heart, exhale. And you go into this rhythmic pattern of that breath. And, and there is an encouragement, start off, feel into it. Everybody's different. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So feeling into it, there is an encouragement when you feel like you've gotten to this place of comfortability with it. To at least engage in that for 20 to 30 minutes, so that you have the ability to really go to the depths of consciousness that are attainable in it, right, or reachable. However, any bit of connection with it is going to be profound. It's just that it's a little bit more palpable in the expression of that when we allow ourselves a little bit more time with it. And then I always encourage to create, if you do it for a half an hour, try to allow yourselves 15 minutes of when you go back to the regular breath for the integration and the receiving of everything that has now come out and is in process of organizing and reorganizing to ground and to integrate, So that's really powerful breath, because the three-part breath really assists in overriding a lot of programmed belief systems, and it really frustrates the thinking mind. And a lot of people find that, resistance. Oh, this breath is so challenging, and I say, perfect. You're the perfect candidate for it, because that's the thinking mind, and it's probably at a place now where it's time to, kind of put it more in its place. So that's one really profound way of connecting with the breath. And then, when I sit in meditation, most often, I inhale through my nose, filling my belly, feeling my ribs, feeling my chest, pausing for a moment, and then exhaling fully and completely out through the mouth, and getting in a rhythm of that. And I often think about, divine, whatever my intention is, connecting to the heart first, to the present moment, and then thinking about, whatever the intention is. I am the will of source. I think of this diamond light, white light flowing down and through into each and every cell of my body, pausing, and on the exhale, releasing anything that no longer serves me. And maybe there's a particular pattern or something that's popping up, that I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that was still there. And so I just see it in a loving and, grateful for your service, grateful for your, all that you've taught me, and, and kind of seeing it out, right? Seeing it. So those are two pretty powerful, I would say, connections with breath. But then there's like the breath of fire, right? Where we're doing like almost like a Mulabon lock, or AKA like Kegel.
Yeah.
Like clenching your perineum, and you're breathing all in through the mouth and out
That's
through
a
the mouth.
powerful one. Yeah.
Yeah. I will disclaimer, if you are a female and on your cycle, this is not a breath to practice during that time frame, or pregnant. But that's really powerful and really stoking sort of the kundalini, the prana, the life force energy within our lower chakras, which, as we know, this is all about ascension, right? Embodying the highest framework of our oversoul, of our heaven on earth in physicality. And oftentimes we find that a lot of people are like, nope, I'm just going to hang out here. So if you find that you're one of those people that really desires to have a greater sense of groundedness and connection with your physical body, and you want to stoke those lower burners and activate those lower chakras to be in connection with the higher chakras, doing that breath of fire, which sounds, I'll just do it really quickly. So you do the Mulabon lock, you do the clenching of your perineum, so to speak, and then it's so it almost sounds like you're only exhaling, but of course we know that's not possible. And it's really just all the lower abdomen that is in movement. So the upper chakras and the upper abdomen remain pretty still, and you're connecting to that, your pelvic area, your lower burners. And so I'd say those are three good breaths to kind of bring into
Amazing. We would love to have you back to do a workshop sometime. I don't know if you're interested. That would be incredible.
Yes. I love
and
that.
Yeah, and question about your food. I mean, you were a chef. That's incredible. I love to cook. And do you ever teach courses on Ayurvedic cooking or food that's healing by chance?
Yeah,
Really?
I haven't, I kind of, when I sort of transitioned out of that, I sort of moved sort of out of doing anything like that. But of course, I'm certainly not in opposition to, and oftentimes people will say, oh, well, do you have a recipe for this? And yeah, certainly, yes. I will say I'm not very well versed, I've just lightly touched upon, Ayurvedic way of living in my health coaching certification, but it was never anything that I did a deep dive into.
Okay. Yeah.
But certainly, high vibrational foods that are, full of life force energy. And also, I'll just drop this in because I know we started off sort of talking about alchemy. One of the ways in which we can, connect with our food and bring it back into its highest expression of its, vibrational blueprint and frequency, or if we're receiving food from, let's say, a restaurant, or someone else has
Mhm.
prepared it for us, or is to remember that we are a vehicle of alchemy, right? Of so much light. And so a lot of times when I'm going to connect, giving thanks to the earth, giving thanks to source, shining light on, and sending love and light to all the beings and elements and everything that have come forth in the creation of the food, I then call forth and use my breath and my hands and think about, oftentimes either diamond white light or the violet flame, or, coming in and through and out of my hands, resurrecting the food and bringing it to its highest vibrational frequency, highest
Yep.
nutritional value. So that's one way that we can all kind of play around and have fun with alchemy.
I love that. I do that too. I literally talk to my food and say, I will be nourished. I will feel love. I will feel connected. I will, so it is so powerful. I've noticed a big shift in the food that I eat and how I feel after I eat when we do that.
Mm,
So that's incredible.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Broklin Rayne. It was so much fun to connect with you today and your amazing wisdom and information. We learned a lot, and our audiences just really love, everything. I mean, people are just really, really grateful for your wisdom. So,
Oh,
how can
thank
we
you.
connect with you? What is your website? And
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, thank you. I feel all the amazing light and love coming from you and from the community of light here. So thank you. And yes, so my website is, you can access it two different ways. Seed, SEED, of consciousness.com, or you can access it by my name, which is Broklin, Brooklin, RAYNE.com. Yeah.
excellent, excellent. I
Yeah.
will put those links down below. So go ahead and check them out and do connect with Broklin. And hopefully, we will have her back for a little workshop on higher healing soon.
Yes.
And if you want to check out more of these great interviews, please do check out apotheosis.live to see who our next upcoming interviewees will be. And it is such a joy to be here. Remember to be grounded, protected, aligned, co creating consciously every day as we reach our highest expression. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Much love.